So before we move on to some problems to practice CPCTC, let's just review how that influences our notation. So going back to what we just drew here, we see it's clear angle A corresponds to angle F, angle B corresponds to angle E, because they both have the two lined angle marks, and angle C corresponds to angle D, because they have the three lined angle marks. So we've said that the conclusion was that triangle number 1 is congruent to triangle number 2, but if we wanted to express this in terms of the vertices, we would say triangle ABC is congruent to, and then we would use corresponding parts in our notation. So A corresponds to F, so if A is coming first here, we would put F first. B comes second, which corresponds to E, and C comes third, which corresponds to D. Okay, so we would have to write, in terms of vertices, that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle FED. So that notation is very helpful when it comes to solving problems that involve identifying the corresponding angular side. So in these problems, we're supposed to complete each congruent statement by naming the corresponding angular side. So let's go ahead and take a look at number 1. So you can see the two triangles here, and we're being told that in these two triangles, triangle UVW is congruent to triangle UWI. The notation itself tells us a lot about the corresponding parts. Okay, there are several ways to look at this. One is to notice that, of course, the angles correspond to each other. So angle U in the first triangle corresponds to angle U in the second triangle, so we can make them both single lines. Angle W corresponds to angle W, so we know that these two angles correspond. And then finally, V corresponds to I, so we can make those two correspond as well. Okay, so that gives us a lot of information about the correspondence between these two triangles. But it also tells us something about the sides that correspond. Because if you take a look, the side VU, which is this side over here, lies between the one lined angle and the three line angle. That would correspond to the side in the other triangle that lies between the same two angles. That would be UI, because it also lies between the one lined angle and the three marked angle. Similarly, UW would be obviously corresponding to itself because it lies between the 1 and the 2 marked angles in both the triangles, and this side, VW, which lies between the 2 and the 3 marks, would be corresponding to WI, which is the side that also lies between the 2 and the 3 marked angles here. So by knowing the corresponding angles, you can also figure out what would be the corresponding sides. Another little shortcut that you can notice is that if you actually look at the notation itself, it's possible to figure out some of the corresponding sides. For example, UW here, which are the first two letters in this notation, would correspond to UW here. Okay, so side UW in the first triangle corresponds to side UW because they share the same positions. Also, side WV in the first triangle would correspond to side WI in the second triangle because they both appear in the second and the third positions. Okay, so you can tell a lot just from the notation, as well as doing it the slightly longer way by marking the angles out and then figuring out which sides fall between which angles. We're going to be using this in a lot of the future problems, so then how would we complete this? Side UW is congruent. Well, obviously it's to side UW by using either of these methods. UW lies between the 1 and the 2 marked angles in both triangles, and it also is the first two letters that appears in the notation.